Secret, a little bit of half and half. Just toss it in there. A little bit of your neighbor's.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold weapons! Now! Charge the lightning field!
Okay, let's see which floor. Gotta get there on time. This one. All right, okay. Ooh, is this Nate Dogg? Okay.
Who's holding up the damn elevator?
What? So, do you want a floor? I'm just gonna hit floor 5.
Wonderful stuff, that Romulan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
I think this is your stop.
Welcome to Dispatch, Ajax. I don't know.
Every time we've come up with skits, it's like 30 seconds before we do them.
Yeah, and some of them are good.
Which ones? I can't think of
those
any off the top of my head.
that we did that were good. There had to be at least some of them.
He is correct. This is Dispatch Ajax. I'm Skip.
I am Jake.
That is true. We are doing very specific subgenres of horror movies. And you would not believe how...
Insular?
Sure. Yes, have some. They can be oddly pointed. Some of these subgenres are.
They can really fit down in a tiny little box.
Is that supposed to be
That
dirty,
goes
or is it a Hellraiser?
Up and down. You like get in and, it's...
I have no idea what
It's
you're doing
okay.
right now.
Yeah, so we're gonna break down the Genesis and...
Is that a Star Trek 2 riff?
What is this the Wrath of the Pod now?
The Wrath of Pod? Yeah. Well, you said Genesis. I thought maybe because that's what we were doing.
Those goddamn pods took my boy.
I'll never forgive them for the death of my pod. That's Star Trek 6, by the way.
The loss of one pod to save many pods.
The will of the many outweighs the will of the pod.
The need of the many, right?
The need of... Why did I say will? Yes, the need...
You're in Goodwill Hunting territory, I think. That's your problem.
That's probably it. I got will on the brain. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the pod.
Those your whales?
I think what you got a hold of there, Jake, is a dream you had.
It is a dream, and it is a fantasy.
If you will it, it is no longer a dream.
So anyway, we are here to discuss a multitude of things, but I think...
You're out of your element, Jake.
The pod and the black pajamas, man. Worthy fucking adversary.
Nihilism. Me.
So today it is time for your spoops, and by way of me, I shall bring you to the land of the lost and the living and the dead. None of those. No, we're actually going...
You got nothing, man. You're shooting blanks,
yep,
man.
I'm flying blind on a rocket cycle right now.
Dive into the topic we're discussing today.
Exactly. So we come out of this lightning field, and we find ourselves surrounded by Naminals, where I shall discuss today the ethos, the ideas behind, the definition, and the history of animal horror.
Question.
Yes?
Do you include Jurassic Park?
I do not, and I will get into why that is.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Okay.
So, animal films are fictional films where animals seek to challenge the predominance of humans through physical, sometimes consumptive violence. Animal horror tells the story of how particular animals or species commit transgressions against humanity, and then recants the punishment that said animal and or species must suffer as a consequence. This is even in the humans are at fault. Animal horror films can be associated with eco horror, also known as like nature run amok films, and creature features, but aren't specifically either one. And for my purposes today, I distinguish them even further down. They don't have reference to otherworldly, supernatural, technological, or space alien creatures.
Okay.
There are no extra abnormal gigantic animals, no mutated animals, no cyborg animals, no alien animals, no overtly paranormal animals, no microbial animals.
Well, that would encompass a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be like Andromeda Strain and...
Yeah, but I mean, you can extend it out. I mean, technically, it would count in the larger scope of animal horror attack. You can have certain things. You can have... I mean, I'll get into the nitty-gritty of all of this. Have you ever heard of White Dog?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
White Dog is a film, I believe, in the late 70s, where this woman, she adopts this dog, but the dog has been trained to hate black people and attack them.
I'm listening.
Yeah, this guy's listening.
Hey, we got one!
Killer animals can be bigger, meaner, or sometimes slightly altered in pseudoscientific ways, but as long as they're still fundamentally animals. But for my specific taste, and for this list, we're, not doing a Deep Blue Sea where the brains of the sharks have been enlarged.
Enhanced, yeah.
Yeah.
Enhanced.
I think some things, so like a slugs, that is like eco-horror subgenre of animal horror, where it's encompassing both.
I love how many subgenres are from subgenres. It's really, you get into like quantum genres at that point.
Yeah, it's all breakdownable.
Superposition genres.
We will not be discussing films that articulate actual violence by humans against animals. So stuff like Cannibal Holocaust.
I was going to say Cannibal Holocaust.
That's a prime example. Faces of Death, stuff like that, where animals are being harmed.
Or not good.
Yeah.
I'm not going to that party.
Do not eat the mashed potatoes, good sir.
If it was this kind of party.
So animal films tend to function on most basic fear, that is of being eaten, of no longer being the apex predator and atop the hierarchy of nature. Now, if you look at it in certain analytical point of view, animals become the new colonizers and consumers, the non-Western other. From the Genesis, as we get through the history, you'll kind of see how this evolves. But a lot of times, animals were seen as the furthest extension of the savage. At least the beginning of these films comes from like journeys into Asia, journeys into Africa, and seeing the people there as subhuman. And thus, when animals attack them, it's all part of that. A lot of the concepts of animal horror derive their nature from a Western colonial point of view.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
There's a lot else that's tied into it. Colonial epistemologies. It is often these dangerous and transgressive animals that elicit suspense and fear. But a lot of times there is a disconnection between the real and the non-real. The pseudo-realist nature of animal horror comes with blurred lines, with representation altered through imagination and or special effects. A lot of times the believability of these films and their nature is strained due to budget restrictions and or anthropomorphized creatures having been given human attributes that they wouldn't normally have.
Mm-hmm.
Except for a few examples. Again, this one we're including because of its central and pivotal nature within the genre. King Kong, Jaws, and The Birds, Those are
The
kind of
Burbs
your
with Tom Hanks. Yeah.
the burbs. Yes, I mean neighbors. Huh? Who needs them?
This was Walter.
Most of these films are low budget and low quality, except for those few shining examples. You also get into ethical concerns. The epistemic violence to animals caused by film. So while early on, when it was a lot of people's first encounter with such creatures, we'll get into that. So like there's a film from 1925 where a man hunts and kills a Komodo dragon.
Oh, Jesus.
And but like that was the first time people they'd never heard of a Komodo dragon before that.
There's a reason they thought it was called a dragon. I mean,
Well,
'cause it
yeah.
really
Well, I mean,
does
a lot
look
of it's like, again, it's to hype up the nature, the fear-inducing and entertaining aspect of these creatures, making them larger than life and more deadly or angry that they aren't really, but they
Right.
use that to
which then was only exacerbated after, we knew that radiation caused mutation, and whether or not that really mattered, it became giant creatures affected by radiation became not only a stand-in for the looming terror that the atomic bomb posed, but also man's folly for creating it. And it also depends on if you're in Japan or you're in the United States, because those approaches are completely different. But
yeah, and we'll get into some of that. But all of these examples of animals, they're often used to demonize and pollute the psychical consensus of said quote-unquote killer animals. They encourage false and frightening ideas of them, which then put the animals outside of the film at risk. Because these animals, they exist outside of the ethical. Especially in these films, they're hardwired without remorse or pity, and thus the human sole recourse is to kill and eliminate such threats. And when that isn't just felt inside the theater with your protagonist, but when you take those ideas outside of the theater into your natural everyday life, it colors the way you see insects, you see sharks, you see snakes, you see, crocodiles, you see lions, any of these.
Side note, have you heard about that rig for his house plant so that it could wield a machete?
Yes.
How crazy is that? This is what we're getting into here. We never stopped to think, should we do a thing?
We've slapped a sticker on it and made a lunchbox out of it.
A plastic lunchbox, and
that would definitely pertain to the eco-horror. That is like the personification of eco-horror, where the plants and vegetation lash out because of what we have done to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Eco-change, notably like global warming, deforestation, human encroachment, etc., that essentially equates to we are consistently, slowly destroying that bit of nature.
Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is really great, because in that opening diatribe, he talks about how we think of the plant world as docile, but it's actually extremely violent, but very slow.
Exactly. And these conceptually complex and scientifically convoluted repercussions placed by the metonym of direct animal violence on humans within the animal film genre. So it's a way to take what we know we're doing to them and where they live and how they survive, and giving them agency to act out. Now, sometimes that can be a little more pointed. So in films like Willard with his rats and Stanley, or Monkey Shines, these are films that highlight humanity's inability to resist taking advantage of their animal companions. I think the more recent set of the Planet of the Apes films definitely highlight that. And there's a lot of these elements you can pluck and pull from, a lot of science fiction and a lot of non-horror specific films and stories, but they have those elements. Yes. Yeah, I can't deny that dino.
That's kind of, that's kind of the thing.
So these animals are outside of the ethical framework, and then are forced to become agents for upholding said ethical framework and to mete out punishment and justice for the harms and wrongs done to them. This also ties into certain gender studies. a lot of times you see a connection to women and animals compared to property within these films and are often denigrated. The representations of animals and women serve to maintain oppressive belief structures that are ingrained within society and thus into the films that are being made.
I think that's very well represented in a lot of those, like, for instance, King Kong. The misogynistic fear comes from the fact that the woman is entranced by its kindness, even though it's so hulking and massive and violent. And then, you know, like, that it might steal your woman. You know, like, there's a whole, like, really misogynistic fear.
There's kind of multiple layers there. There's the sexually aggressive other from the Dark Continent who, you know, seems to be overpowering through their physical prowess and otherness, taking the white woman, the perfect symbol of virginity and purity. There's a lot of layers to that. You often find, along with this particular gender-studied view of animal horror, a retelling of essential patriarchal myth. There's a lot of Freudian readings of, say, Jaws or Piranha that tie in both the fear of vagina dentata, but also of the killer phallus. As one person that I was reading wrote, he described the shark as an enlarged marauding penis.
Right.
And it's so often in these films, they are punishing, attacking, killing, and eating the sexualized naked and or half-naked victims.
Right. Also, in tandem with that, there's a good queer theory reading of that as well. For instance, Jaws, it's supposed to resonate with straight people as fear because it's a wandering phallus that can consume you. And so, like, you're closeted, you know, fearful straight person, or you're just straight up homophobic person would feel threatened by, yes, the giant consuming phallus coming to get you.
Yeah. I think especially within the sharksploitation subgenre of this particular genre, you see
Anaconda.
You see a similar connection that I think Alien has and why Alien works so well. It is both this marriage of phallus and vaginal that are tied inextricably together on a pseudo-sexual nature that are both penetrating and consuming you at the same time.
It's a good point. And then on top of that, when you finally establish more lore and you get to Aliens, then with the Queen, the idea of the powerful woman, the woman who, the men feeling threatened by women in power or, you know, with agency, essentially, sort of combated also by Ripley being a good example of, you know, a female character with agency. I think that's really astute. That's really interesting. Throughout most cultures in the world, there's a were creature of some sort. I think it stems from the fear of, even though we're apex predators, the fear of other wild animals who could, when using that mindset from, you know, like predatory beasts, that though we have developed evolutionarily and we have developed an intellect beyond what we consider primitive, the animalistic instincts are still there. It's kind of a fear of what's inside of us and
letting
what
the beast
we're capable of. Yeah, letting the beast out. Right.
Which ties in with, say, a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde,
the Hulk,
similar things, and you're taking these narratives about these predatory creatures. But how do you amp up that horror? Why don't you instill them more anthropomorphism? Give them, you know, human-esque. It's stronger, it's faster, it's more deadly than both the human and its predator combined into something all new.
And that's an interesting subgenre too. Like, well, at least narratively, it's an interesting dive because, like, you know, we always think about that. I've mentioned it before with you off camera or whatever, but the weird, stupid tendency for writers to, in situations where they're dealing with like an alien or an other or something, to hybridize humans with that thing and then create this whole new thing, which is like more than man and more than holy. Like Alien Resurrection or Dune, for instance, or, countless other things. Well, they made a X-Files.
The Fly?
The Fly, yeah, excellent point. It's just that I think it stems from the fears that I honestly think it's the human fear that as dominant as we have been and masters of the planet, we are still so vulnerable to these basic primal instincts, both within us and externally. And then the next step in that commentary is trying to cope with, trying to like balance out that fear, trying to like rationalize it in the form of, well, but if I was combined with that, I would be even more powerful than resurrection or things like that. You're like, okay, so you're kind of and you're lower on the food chain, and there's something above you, and you think for some reason that you adding yourself into that thing makes it better than both. Really just kind of makes that other thing because you just added your weaknesses to its dominance, I'm just like, I've always, sci-fi and horror and fantasy always does that. Like, this is one thing, man, this is another thing, the other, it's dominating man, and what's the next step? Combining them, thus making it lamer. I mean, they do that all the time, even in like biblical type horror, like, where the devil mated with a man, and now it's the ultimate thing. It was like, is it? Or is it just a shittier devil?
I would like to see the devil mating with a man, though.
Well,
I'd pay my $5 for that feature.
I'd buy that for $1.
Get it, devil, get it.
Driving that SUX down the main drive in Detroit.
So that's kind of like a general basic outline of kind of the understanding of what the genre is and kind of some of the psychological underpinnings. Now I'd like to get into the history of the animal attack narrative. So this goes all the way back to Mesopotamia, if you want to get back that far, but
no one was alive then.
It was the time before Sigourney Weaver.
Recycle bit.
But for cinema, which I'd like to just focus on, this goes back to 1902. And this is the execution of Topsy. This is the rogue
God
elephant.
Damn it. That's so sad and gross.
But I do think it deserves mention here. A rogue elephant that was in a circus, was just trying to live its life, and then a few bad things happened that it was blamed for. It was then publicly...
Piece of shit, Edison.
Yes. This is
going
all
back
true.
in time to kill Hitler. I'm going to kill Edison and Ford. Those guys.
Let's get a ball. But this, as awful as it was, marks the beginning of commercial entertainment at the cinema, coming from the quote-unquote attack and eventual death of an animal. After this, natural history of films were described way back in the 1913 journals. Now, they came out of travelogue and expedition films.
Did you look into like the Roman games that they would do, or they'd bring in?
No, I specifically stayed away from doing anything pre-film. Animals attacking people, whether it's in live action or in stories. This goes back to the dawn of humanity. So
Sure. The only reason I ask was because, like, I know for a fact the bread and circuses thing, there was a huge period where they would kill 500 lions a month, or, just for entertainment. Like, they would pit them against slaves and then make them fight to the death. And that's where the spectacle of people watching animal horror came from. That's all. I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, it was just a little bit outside the scope.
Because that could be a whole long thing on its own.
I know. It's just all these rabbit holes, and, it's like, which Mario pipe am I going to jump into and get sucked down into a new level?
Please be the Chris Pratt one. Please be the Chris Pratt one. Yes.
It's me, Mario.
It's on me, Mario. I'm working on a motorcycle.
Did you know that I don't have personality post Parks and Rec?
Well, post Guardians.
Guardians is Parks and Rec in space.
Well, but you know what? He's great in those for what he is, and he especially dealt well.
He is. He's a specific idealized character actor that then has been formed into a leading man for some reason.
And he can't because he's got the looks.
Yeah, I mean, everybody does something right. I mean, I good one time. That doesn't mean it's something I can do again and again.
Wow, this is bared our souls here.
No, that's not true. My sexual prowess is. No, let's just cut all this. There's no need for
your sexual David prowess.
I'm much more of a sexual Robert Zadar, if anything. Lots of chin stuff. That's what I'm all into.
Jake and I in college decided we were going to use as code for a penis or a phallus in general the Bowie knife instead of the Bowie knife. Because David Bowie was, this amazing sexual dynamo. But now I'm thinking the David prowess is the right. I mean, it kind of works out on paper. Large, in charge, intimidating. And then when it comes to the real deal, they replace him with a different dude. The real guy.
And then they protect the whole thing with a helmet. That's like it's just not the same.
Hey, at least they use protection.
At least they use protection.
There you go.
This is true. So
I feel like we're onto something there.
So these travelogue and exhibition films, they're not necessarily considered the start of animal horror, but they did lay out the kind of burgeoning genre as an inspiration of the struggle between man and animal. These were often semi-documentaries that portrayed animals as ravenous and dangerous and the need to be done away with.
Tamed by man.
But they also often conflated indigenous populations along with those animals.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like Martin Johnson's Trailing African Wild Animals in 1923, or Among the Cannibal Isles of the South Pacific from 1918.
Jesus.
Yeah, do you not see? Yeah. You see the seeds being laid there?
Wow.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, the whole, when Disney made nature films that they just made up, like the Lemmings thing, lemmings don't actually follow each other off a cliff. Like Disney was doing a nature film and lemmings were boring. So they decided to make up a narrative. No, is literally true.
I didn't. But I mean, if you go back to the original, what you'd call big budget blockbuster nature documentary, something like Nanook of the North, I mean,
oh yeah,
that's all fake. It's been fake since the beginning. All done for entertainment purposes. Don't let truth get in the way of a good story.
Right. And if there is no story, make one up.
Exactly.
Shout out to my boy, Nanook of the North.
Disney fucking up from beyond the grave. Woo woo. This becomes part of the important seeds that are even laid in King Kong that we will get to, but the ape is part of the savage and untamed wilderness, there for your innocent and beautiful white women. So you also get the 1926 William Douglas Burden film where he traveled to the West Indies to shoot and capture a giant Komodo lizard. Super cool. There's also 1927's Chang, done by Marion Cooper, which was an adventure documentary about elephants, quote unquote, causing trouble in northern Siam.
Wow.
Yeah. So these develop realism and non-realism within animal horror cinema. Because they were like creating educational films.
Quote unquote educational.
Yeah, and honestly, this is kind of where King Kong gets its start. So Cooper and Burton, who made King Kong, they originally had an idea for an educational film. They left for the Belgian Congo to document and study the mountain gorilla.
Oh, Jesus.
They built an enclosure in a part of the jungle to achieve the best photo opportunities, and the enclosure was constructed in such a way so it would not be seen on film. They would capture gorillas and place them in this area. Because of their observations of the habits of the gorilla, what they ate and so forth, Burton and Cooper believed that they would achieve authenticity despite their artificial arrangement. However, critical voices were raised against the proposed project and their treatment. So within the scientific community, there was a mix of science and showmanship that proliferated in the Hollywood travelogue expedition films of the 1920s and became increasingly suspect as it went on. Because of this...
Oh yeah, it's like the Mr. Show skipped the the story of Everest, you know?
Yeah. So because of this like souring in the nature, the views of these films, Cooper abandoned his plans to document the quote-unquote real behavior of apes and thus turned his attention to a romantic horror film in King Kong, which eventually premiered in depression-stricken United States in 1933. The film hyperbolized many of the popular elements that had made travelogue expeditions films of the 1920s successful: the mystery, intrigue, and danger of unknown lands, the violence and raw sexuality of nature waiting to explode, the thrill and adventure of capturing and taming quote-unquote savage beasts.
Ugh.
You also get the themes raised in the original King Kong of the animal revenge, the white feminine innocence being threatened, and the centrality of white masculinity.
Yeah, that went well.
Yeah. Super, super good. But that's kind of like, King Kong stands out like as your first moving from quote-unquote attacks to a fictionalized animal horror in its essence. You also get something like The Island of Lost Souls in 1932, which is Dr. Moreau, but because of its nature, I'm not including it. It stands to the larger idea of animal horror as a genre, but it's not necessarily what I'm looking to speak about today.
Sure.
With the horror film industry in the 1930s and 40s, it was mainly concerned with your supernatural monsters, your vampires, your mummies, your werewolves. There were some Hollywood-produced animal monsters: the Devil Bat, starring Bela Lugosi; the Black Cat, which was an Edgar Allan Poe short story; is Cat People from 1942. But it didn't really take off that big. During the Cold War and the Atomic Age, and a lot of those particular fears were no longer outside. They weren't in Africa. They weren't in the Far East. They were in your backyard. They were in America. That's when you start getting stuff like different insects and spiders, prehistoric dinosaurs. A lot of times they were all juiced up because of radiation fears, or they were invading similar creatures from space.
Also recent discoveries in archaeology, dinosaur bones, and, the whole, we've discovered things that we didn't know existed over, 6,000 years ago or what.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these were like on the forefront of, the bleeding edge of what we knew at the time.
The bleed.
Now, while you had all of these post-World War II narratives evolving in the horror genre, and especially the animal horror, gorillas never fell out of fashion. Savage Girl from 1932, Son of Kong, 33, blah, 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 White Gorilla, 45, Mighty Joe Young, 1949, The Bride and the Beast from 1958, Conga in 1961. It keeps going, especially once you start really exploiting that. You get the violent and sexually voracious gorillas that haunted the exploitation films. The stuff like The Beast That Killed Women.
Is that the name of a movie?
Yes. Yeah, that's from 1965.
Oh, God! I've been trying.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, for one, it's exploitation films, and two, it's the natural progression of demonizing the other and making the savage even more. Now, into the 1960s, animal horror, you get a lot more of the jungle predators, such as lions and tigers. So you get Black Zoo, 1963. You also get bees in Deadly Bees from 1966. You also get the first film to feature shark attack is Shark from 1969. Now, interesting about this one, the film was initially planned as a traditional thriller, but it wasn't until the shark that was presumed sedated accidentally attacked and killed a stuntman during the filming that then they decided that the shark should become an integral part of the marketing of the film.
Wow. Capitalism, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, it's hasn't failed us yet. But the most important of insects, it is the 1963 classic from Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. Now, honestly, there is a plethora of things to be said and read about with The Birds, kind of what it says about the culture, the psychological aspects of The Birds, what kind
of weird director
portrayed.
Hitchcock was.
There's a lot to be said. There's so much to be said that I'm skipping over it. The Birds is cool.
fair.
Watch it. It's a classic.
It's a classic.
And it is like, you have King Kong, and then we jump kind of to the Birds, and you see kind of what the Birds, it takes animal horror in another direction, and kind of proliferates a furthering of what animal horror can do. And it's also one of the better animal horror films that came out. But you guys can go check out kind of what that film what that film represents, and I'll leave that for you. So we return to the 60s and early 70s. American horror starts to put out more radical and subversive films. Stuff like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which initiated the zombie genre. Blood Feast in 63. Along with like Halloween. You kind of get your slasher and gore subgenres. Rosemary's Baby in 68, where you're kind of getting your demonic subgenre. A lot of these horror films in this period were responses, moral and humanitarian disaster of the Vietnam War, and increasingly understood as a politically oppressive and conservative capitalist society. From this, you get the remarkably successful pinnacle of animal horror, 1975's Jaws. Which,
Decent flick.
it's not bad. You can see where it's coming from a moralistic and humanitarian point, but also from an economic point.
From the shark's perspective.
Well, there is something to be said that you didn't really get first-person point of views from the animals up until Jaws. That kind of started one ball of wax rolling, but you also got economic perspective of the beach. This becomes a popular trope within animal horror after this as well.
The bottom line is more important than the... Yeah, you're playing the odds here. It's like, well, how much does it cost to,
Yeah, what are a few dead people to all the money we'll make with the live ones?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jaws also kicked off the new subgenre of animal horror, sharksploitation movies. Personal favorite of mine. I go out of my way to watch almost every new shark movie that comes out. Most of them are pretty atrocious, but for me, it hits, one of my dark fears of the unknown of the ocean and this large, predator. It's perfectly designed. Dark fears of the unknown of the ocean and this large, predator that is it's perfectly designed for like swimming, reproducing, and eating. And once I am in the water, I myself am just food.
Sure. Yeah, I get that fear. Please tell me you're not one of those which is scarier, the ocean or space people that picks the ocean, because that's just...
I can't imagine who you're talking about. Wink. I don't even see it as being... I don't think it's fair.
It's not a debate.
It's not a fair dialogue between the two, honestly.
No, it's idiotic. It's like... Yeah, no, it's stupid. It's like, which is worse, being shot with a bullet or being nuked? Gee, I don't know. Which is worse?
Yeah.
Fucking kidding me?
Yeah, there's definitely like certain levels to that, and one is grossly outweighing the other.
Glad you're not one of those guys.
I mean, I wouldn't like to be caught alone in either.
I wouldn't want to be in Deep Water, the movie, but, Open Water, the movie, but...
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It is pretty scary.
But at least that's a scenario I could find myself in. I'm not going to find myself in gravity. I can't ever be in space.
Well, you can, but it's going to cost you.
It's never. I personally can never be in space. It's just never going to happen.
All you have to do is jerk off, Elon Musk. Or Bezos.
What if I did them both at the same time? Double my odds.
Oh, they would be in the same room. They're super weird about it. They are.
Now I'm just picturing like some weird glory hole closet where it's like there are two holes, and I'm like kind of like doing the milk machine on each side of me.
Mm-hmm. A lonely farmer's daughter who's just become nubile, and a stranger has come to visit. Two strangers have come to visit, and they have to stay in the barn.
Oh, how did both the vacuum salesman and the Bible salesman both come at the same time?
Well, they both came at the same time because of you, Jake.
Writer of many things, wrote, the ocean
writer wrote.
and its dark, ominous depths make for a truly scary movie ride. This is why films like Jaws, Piranha, and Orca have endured. These are films that play on the fear of the inner space of the ocean, which will forever be a place foreign and alien to the likes of land-dwelling mammals known as humans.
You have Jaws, Piranha, Orca, Inner Space.
Dude, if Martin Short's coming for me...
In the water, in the deep water. I imagine him like an anglerfish, you know.
I was kind of thinking him as like the Joker fish that
God,
Joker would make with the big smile and just chomping down his big old pearly whites.
No. Maybe the best Joker arc. Oh man, that's...
So Jaws became a giant blockbuster and was at the time the biggest and fastest grossing film in history of the industry on September 5th, only 78 days after its release. After this, sharks supplant the primate as the most popular animal horror protagonist. And it is with the fourth sequel, Jaws the Revenge from 1984.
Fourth best one.
Where we get the revenge narrative. Where
Which is so stupid. It's the worst plot of all time.
I've always thought of it as the son of the son of the son of the shark that was in the original Jaws.
Who's going after only the wife of Roy Scheider.
Yeah, it's going after the Brody bloodline.
It's real Hatfields and McCoys with...
But this highlighted a popular motif there and after of the revenge plotline within animal horror. That kind of coincided with the other popular revenge narrative at play within horror on the grander scale, you know, of stuff like Last House on the Left, you know.
Wait. Well, why does that... Explain your... I'm sorry, maybe I missed something.
No, the revenge horror as being...
just revenge horror in general.
Yes, yeah. It really, at this time, you know, in the 70s, that proliferated, and then it moves beyond the realms of normal revenge to the anthropomorphized Jaws the Revenge, where now anger on humanity or specific human and enact said revenge plotline within those films.
The only animal revenge horror that isn't eco-based.
Yes. That became a more prevalent thing after this.
Really? Because I thought like that stuff like frogs...
No, I'm talking about revenge. The revenge plotline within animal horror.
Okay. Right. Yes, I agree with you, but I'm saying the eco horror is also a revenge plot most of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that come after Jaws 4?
So, eco-horror can be linked to the environmental movement that gained considerable ground and which became more mainstream in the late 70s and the early 80s.
Oh, okay. The formation of the EPA.
Yeah, this was the upsurge of the EPA, animal rights activism, vegetarianism became a popular diet.
The near extinction of the humpback whale, as showcased in Star Trek 4.
Greenpeace being established.
Yeah.
So you have stuff like Frogs in 72, Nightwing in 1979, Razorback in 84.
Oh, Razorback done by, what's his name for the Highlander, the Highlander director.
Yeah, yes.
Each Razorback is immortal.
There can only be one.
And there can only be one giant Razorback.
Yeah, so these are when animals were striking back at humanity as humanity was exploiting the ecosystem within which the animal resides and not simply can be understood as reclaiming their central position in the ecosystem and on the earth.
You're absolutely right, but I think sometimes there's an overarching, like, we're doing this to balance things out for the entire ecosystem. Like, it's revenge for nature itself, not just for their...
Yes, humanity's encroached and taken away so much from these animals that they are then revolting and revenging, taking back what is theirs.
For the greater good, not even just for like their specific species, but for all of...
Yes, it is nature kind of as an entire whole gaining revenge on the humanity that has done them wrong.
Which is interesting.
It still pops up every once in a while, but it hasn't stayed in popularity as much as it was like in the 80s.
Phase 4, baby.
In the 90s, you start getting the uptick of digital technology, which was replacing robotics and stop motion animation. And with these special effects, your standard nature doc stuff or bringing animals into a human setting, something like Roar or whatnot, which we will get into
I was hoping you're going to touch on Roar. Yeah.
But then you get stuff like Jurassic Park. You're able to bring these animals to life in a new way that it both heightens the realism in one way, but also lessens the realism.
Okay.
Because at that point,
Explain.
the CGI technology has opened the door to further anthropomorphizing these animals. You're able to make them emote and act in ways that human actors would, but not necessarily how door to further anthropomorphizing these animals. You're able to make them emote and act in ways that human actors would, but not necessarily how actual animals function. Because of that, it gives them an agency they wouldn't normally have in the wild, and you're further weaponizing distrust and putting human emotions and agency upon these animals, which they wouldn't have otherwise. Because if you're just filming, say, a lion walking around, that's the most you can do. And you can't really do much more with a puppet, but once you become CGI, you can focus in, you can highlight their eyes, the way that their lips curl, their body movements. It's a way to make them act more human than they would normally be, which
then human
breaks the realism that would be inherent otherwise.
Perfect example of that is in the first season of Lost. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the making of behind the scenes stuff on the DVDs, but when they first meet the polar bear, they wanted to make it all practical effects. So they made a dummy polar bear. Hold on. I'll show you a picture of it. It was so bad that Abrams had to abandon the practical effects things altogether. They were a laughing stock on the internet. You can tell watching it that the polar bear, the CGI polar bear is ridiculous, but then if you actually see what the practical one was, wow. Anyway.
Along with the dichotomy of more real and less real, you also get more low-budget animal horror films. Because the CGI makes it much more economically feasible, you can make stuff like Sharknado or Ice Spiders, or Land Shark or Ghost Shark or, whatever, because you can easily put these animals in situations where they wouldn't be otherwise, and the much more fantastical elements, whatever, because you can put these animals in situations where they wouldn't be otherwise, and the much more fantastical elements become that much easier to put on screen. Small screen, but screen nonetheless. I'd also want to talk a little bit about the predominance of this being a Western genre, an English-speaking genre. There are films like this in China and Japan, stuff like Croczilla or Painted Skin. You have the kaiju films, which are part of this. Not necessarily what I'm covering, per se, but a part of that.
That's a different conversation. I think we could talk some.
It's its own thing, which is why I'm not really getting into it. But it does speak a lot, and the innate Western view of these, whether they be predatory, others, extensions of the savage, the creeping of the animal into society. These are all Western views of animals that have dominated, proliferated, and become turned into horror. You just don't tend to get as much of that in, Eastern cinema. There's a more harmonious relationship. There's a further deepening kind of emotional and spiritual connection, I think, to nature that isn't expressed within their cinema as opposed to the Western view of those things in our cinema.
That's interesting too, because I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking about the. I think one of the things that they tied in was that people oftentimes have like a totemic reverence to animals, either in spirit form or just revering nature and, you know, as it is in, you know, in a more harmonious way than the Western view of, well, kill it, skin it, and eat it, and, you know, consequences be damned. That's one of the reasons they were also able to tie in, you know, people of color with the savage, because they revered the animal world, where Westerners, especially in the British Empire, they saw nature as something to conquer, and that everything else would be provided for them and nature be damned.
It's fascinating. You don't really think about it until you kind of look into things. And you're like, oh yeah, that really isn't something that comes up. And the few examples you tend to have are, you might say that the westernization of those animals. You know, you get something like Gojira, you get something like the Host. These are,
I love them.
Specifically Western influenced versions of nature, and how they have changed, mutated, and become demonized versions of those creatures they were harmonious with beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like with you know, like sea monsters and stuff, where they see a manatee and they're like, man, I'm so weirded out that I want to that thing that I'm going to call it a monster, and also you know, a mermaid or whatever.
I feel so seen.
I feel exposed. Hide my shame.
So to round this out, I wanted to give you guys some options of things if you wanted to kind of get like the best of the best from these particular genres. There's Wild Beasts from 1984, but one that I think both Skip and I can discuss is Roar from 1981.
Oh man. Wow.
Which I finally just caught up with just the other day in preparation for this. I've had it in my possession for years, but I've been kind of like waiting to watch it with people, and then nobody would watch it with me, so I just watched it on my own.
Oh man.
And really, it's not exactly a horror film. The horror kind of derives from truly being scared for these actors who are interacting with these live and extremely real, uninhibited, wild big cats.
Jesus. Yeah, the director wanted to do something avant-garde, sort of a cinema verite, but with live, dangerous animals, filmed cinema verite style in a movie in which the premise is these dangerous animals kill people. That's the most idiotic, dangerous, boneheaded thing I've ever heard. I mean, cinema-wise, ever.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is insane.
Yeah.
This does star Melanie Griffith, who was mauled by a lion during the filming and required plastic surgery.
Wow, that explains a lot.
Yeah,
actually.
she had 50 stitches on her face.
Holy
Yeah, they feared she would lose an eye, but she recovered and was not too disfigured.
Well, Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't there, so...
Yeah, the basic idea of this film is that this family, which Melanie Griffith is the daughter of, is going to visit, has all of these big cats living with him, so as to protect them from hunters who would kill them otherwise. And he is on the leading edge of, you know, eco-friendly, we need to save these animals. Man is the true monster here, and we are the predator in this situation, and we can get along. And I'm going to take care of them. Very like a Joe Exotic kind of, you know, idea, whatever.
Right, and also completely misguided like Joe Exotic or Carol Baskin.
Insanely. To where, like, you actually see him getting mauled, getting attacked by these things, because all of the attacks that happened in the film were real and usually resulted in actual injury to the cast and crew.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. The horror comes from, like, when you see these animals actually leaping out and swiping at these actors who are put in this awful situation, you know, or when, like, you know, a 350-pound lion just lays right on top of an actor and will not move, which happens multiple times during the film. It's
like,
crazy.
Stop it.
Yeah, I mean,
the lions were just like, cut it out. Jesus, I don't want to have to kill you.
And I'm not talking like there's like one or two. There's like consisting like, you know, 15 to 20 full like jaguars, leopards, tigers, and lions all on screen together,
who famously get along well in the wild.
It's not a horror film because it's not exactly. It's weird because it both highlights these animals are scary. Look what can happen. I truly fear for these people, especially once you know the story behind the film of the true actual danger on display. But the film, it's almost kind of like a Disney made for TV, kind of like, Swiss Family Robinson kind of stuff.
Yeah. The actual narrative is not important or in any way, shape, or form really relevant to the gestalt of that film at all.
Yeah.
It could be nothing. I mean, it is nothing. It's a nothing movie, but the insanity behind I'm going to say hubris of the filmmaking is really just the only story. And it makes it a horror film sort of meta-wise, like accidentally.
100%. So that's kind of that particular part of historical nonfictional. Number 2 in this particular category section, I call Benevolent Buddies Turn to Malevolent Murderers.
It's the worst British sitcom I've ever seen.
They were going to be the best of chums.
Bosom Buddies. Oh, I thought you were going to say Bosom Buddies. That's funny.
No, they were chum because they turned into meat that you feed.
No, so it's a sharksploitation film.
It's your shark buddy. I think this particular set of the subgenre tends to include animals that you would normally found inside the house, and perhaps your true companions turn against you. So stuff like
the animals coming from inside the house.
You have Strays from 1981, where it's a bunch of cats. Things go bad. Dogs from 1978. Yeah, those dogs aren't your best friend.
Turns out it was actually just trying to compete with Cats, the musical.
Cujo from 1983, a classic.
Good example. Mm-hmm.
Like as previously mentioned before, Monkey Shines from 1988, which is a ridiculous but kind of fun film. Shakma, which is probably the best baboon attacks film you're going to get. It's
hands down.
Okay, it didn't have a lot of competition, but it still did it. It still made it.
There were 4 or 5 others, I'm sure.
You still got to come out on top to be considered the best.
Hollywood's a copycat league,
And I think one that particularly resonates with Nope, recently coming out, Link from 1986, about a dangerous chimpanzee.
I haven't seen Nope, so don't spoil it.
Yep.
Just saying.
You should. It's one of the better horror films from this year.
I know. I need to. I just haven't had time, and I really want to.
I think you'll appreciate it whenever you get to it.
Oh, I'm sure. I've heard good things.
My next subgenre I'd like to get into is probably the most prevalent. That's what I would call animals attack at home, quote unquote. My next subgenre I'd like to get into is probably the most prevalent. That's what I would call animals attack at home, quote unquote. Now, this is where you get animals that aren't necessarily like, oh, look, it's an octopi.
I'm being attacked. Good Lord, no.
You're just sucking on your head a bit.
Oh, it's Starro.
These are where animals who normally wouldn't be in your house or attacking, they come at you. So like an arachnophobia.
Harry and the Hendersons.
That doesn't fit.
Why? Because Bigfoot's not real or whatever?
Well, 1, it's a question whether it's an animal monster kind of thing. 2, realm of the paranormal, I think.
Oh, come on. We all know for a fact that David Suchet is a famous Sasquatch hunter. And, no, the only unbelievable thing about that is that the family keeps peanut butter in the fridge.
Hey, man. Savages. There's the Kingdom of Spiders, which I'm sure you love.
William Shatner?
The old Shat. Fangs from 2002. You have Frogs, which previously mentioned from 1972. That's probably the best Frogs attack film.
It's definitely in the top 5 frog attack films. It's actually not a bad movie. The environmental message isn't bad at all. Isn't that Chris Christopherson? Or is it Brolin? James Brolin? It's either Christopherson or Brolin. It's one of the two.
Since I have the internet open. I'm gonna look that up, and I'm gonna tell you that it was Sam Elliott.
Wow. Okay, I was completely off, but I guess kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah, unless you were thinking of someone else.
No,
that must have been who
it was one of those kind of guys. Yeah, because it was pre-Roadhouse Sam Elliott when he was a dreamboat or whatever for certain people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's 1972, so he's working for a chunk of the audience. Slugs from 1988. But I incorporate them because I don't think they go too far outside the bounds of normalcy of like both in size or in, science affecting their environment, causing them to attack.
Right. Well, in Phase 4, if I remember right, it's isn't it like a natural evolution, or was it like something like an asteroid hit or something? I don't know. There was something that naturally caused them to do what they did.
I believe, if I remember right, it was an evolutionary thing.
This is the next step in their evolution,
Yeah.
and then they
They
great, interesting. The movie is what it is. Quality-wise, you can say whatever you want, but it is a fascinating concept, really interestingly executed, and directed by Saul Bass.
Yes.
Which is really, really interesting.
Yeah. You have insect genre with a Swarm from 1978, or Deadly Bees, I mentioned before, 1966. Snakes with Rattled, 1996. I'm not counting Anaconda in this because they go to the jungle to find something else and encounter an anaconda.
Into its lair.
Exactly.
Right? So that's why you probably don't put Lake Placid or
Lake Placid
like
I don't put because that is a super giant crocodile that is outside of its normal realm, and it is extremely abnormal size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Lake Placid, Placid is like a 35-foot long crocodile.
But I thought it was never meant to be it's big, but it's not like there's no special caveat to why it's big.
No, they don't say why it's big, but because it is so abnormal, it doesn't make it on my particular list. I find it to be more in line with a huge giant ape like King Kong. Jaws it's a big shark, but it's also not. I mean, it's 25 foot, and great whites in the wild do range, that's kind of the top end.
That's actually a feasible possibility is that this shark does exist.
Exactly. I think,
and could go out there and kill it.
I think something like Alligator from 1980 or Crawl from, and that's crawl, like you crawl on the ground.
Not crawl.
No glaives involved here.
No. Crawl from, what was it, a couple years ago?
Yeah, 2019, which is a
good
film,
movie.
It's a film I didn't really get on page with originally, but I've seen a couple more times since, and I find it very effective.
Yeah, it is.
It's a very good
It's one
job.
of those there's a hard. I mean, it's not flawless, but it's hard to complain about the way the movie is executed, especially for its genre and its premise. It's I think it's a very well done genre piece.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention Alligator because it is one of the first times that you have the urban legend that sewers and then growing coming out to attack. That has proliferated since then, but that's kind of the first step in that.
Do you count Chud? Can we count Chud in that?
You know I can't count the Chud. Chud has its own special place in our heart and our bellies, but
come on, bud. Come on.
Oh, number deuce. And last but not least, we will come to We Came to Their Home. That's where you get an anaconda. That's where you get Grizzly from 1976, which is essentially Jaws, but with fur. About a giant grizzly bear.
It's a big furry shark.
Which is
waterlogged.
If you go side by side between these films, they match up so closely that they even utilize the same endpoint. Sorry,
it's a big furry shark.
Which is
waterlogged.
If you go side by side between these films, they match up so closely that they even utilize the same endpoint. Sorry, I'm going to spoil Grizzly for you. In Jaws, you have Brody shooting the tank and the shark blows up. In Grizzly, I just use a bazooka and blow.
Why not? Cut out the middleman.
It's just a big smoldering spot where the Grizzly once was. But I would say a more effective bear attack film would be Backcountry from 2014.
Oh, yeah, that is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You also get the
Or The Revenant, honestly.
Yeah, The Revenant. Revenant is
Great movie.
a great movie. Part of that utilized this genre to great effect. We are in their water. You get shark exploitation films like Jaws, The Shallows, Open Water, 47 Meters Down. Some of those are good. Some of those are quite awful. But you also get Barracuda from 1978, or Piranha from the same year, or Piranha 3D from 2010.
And then Piranha 3 Double D.
3 Double D. Or Orca, which I think is a film that everyone listening to this podcast should go watch. It's crazy. It is an orca goes to hunt down and kill the man that killed its mate and offspring. And so it chases Richard Harris up to the North Pole.
So it's Jaws 4: The Revenge, yes.
Kind of, but this is pre-helicopters. In this one, it takes out a whole shanty town on the edge of the water because it knocks down the pillars holding it up. It's great in a bad way. It's
important to remember. Yeah, I agree. And if you were us or older and have ever read older comic books, there was a period when that movie came out that the back cover of every comic book was a poster for Orca.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Like Marvel, DC, it didn't matter. They were all Orca all over the place. It is also important to point out that Orca is also based on a book written by Peter Benchley, who wrote Jaws. He's got a thing. He's got a type.
Hey, man, if it makes money, keep dark magics that are because of the thing.
I thought it was just a giant thing.
Was it just a giant I felt like there was some dark forces at work because of, but I don't remember well enough.
I don't remember. I remember also that he made a different shark movie, essentially. Well, I mean, it was a book he wrote too, but it was essentially a rehashing of, or maybe pre-hashing of Deep Blue Sea, where it was a genetically engineered super intelligent shark. The movie version, the made-for-TV version, had Craig T. Nelson in it as the protagonist, I believe.
No, that's Beast.
And that's Beast. So which is the one with the octopus? Because that was also a made-for-TV NBC one, I think.
Yeah. The Craig T. Nelson and octopus film is the same film. That is The Beast.
I thought there was another shark one he did.
I mean, he wrote other books. He did White Shark. He did The Deep, Shark Trouble, Shark Life.
Are you there? God, it's me, Jaws.
Yeah, I don't know which particular one.
I don't know. Maybe I watched Deep Blue Sea right after it. I don't remember. But either way, I remember those happening. Anyway, either way, Peter Benchley's got a type. That's what we're saying.
I don't think there are any good other than Roar, lion, animal horror films. You have Beast from 2022 with Idris Elba, which isn't very good, and there's Prey.
What about Ghosts in the Darkness?
Ghosts in the Darkness. It almost made it to my list. Kind of in the more historical section.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a lion horror movie.
It is. Honestly, the reason I didn't mention it was because I forgot to write it down.
There we go.
So,
there she is.
Thank you for calling me out on that. But
just helping you be thorough.
Just helping, he says, as he pulls the knife from out my back.
Mm-hmm.
Tiger films, you don't get a ton either. There is Burning Bright from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of like Crawl, but with a tiger. As people are locked inside a house with a ravenous tiger.
There was a movie I saw a couple years ago. I don't know if you saw it or maybe you had mentioned it and I didn't notice, but there was this pool and a guy gets stranded with a crocodile.
Yes. Oh, God. Is it just the pool?
It might be the pool. That's actually not too bad for what it is.
Well, I mean...
And it's in that genre.
Conceptually, yes. It's from 2018. I believe it's is it a Thai film? Or...
It's either Thai or Indie. No, it's not Indian. It's definitely...
It's Thailand. Yeah, it's from Thai.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The basic concept is a man gets trapped inside an empty pool, a swimming pool, with an alligator or crocodile.
Specifically one, because one only exists in certain parts of the world. I think it's probably a crocodile.
Yeah, I can never get this straight, honestly. I've been struggling for
not
that
a
my entire
caiman.
life. It is not a caiman. Unfortunately, there aren't very many wolves incorporated into animal horror films. I feel like that's a prime predator to use. You have the Gray from 2011.
I was going to say the Gray.
which
yeah.
is kind of, but
It's
not
whatever.
really. And there's
It's fine. And it's fine.
there's
It's
Frozen
whatever.
from 2010.
Oh, is that the one where they're on the
ski lift that gets stuck.
That one is
starring
kind of
Iceman
scary.
from X-Men.
Yeah, Sean Ashmore. It's kind of scary mostly because of the horrifying real things. Yeah, which isn't really the horror
Exactly.
like, linchpin.
Yeah.
It's the cold.
It's a film. It's a film that you're scared because of that scenario. The wolves are the afterthought.
Yeah. The wolves are just one of the other incidents that would occur in that scenario. It's not the main driver of the horror. No,
It's not the Adam Driver of the horror.
well, definitely not that. Even though, honestly, I don't even think you need the wolves in that movie. I mean, I understand why you put them at the end because, like, that's your final looming thing.
Yeah.
And then, like, because you're building this whole time to, like, the whole thing is about the horrible things that would happen to you over the progression of time in this scenario, and that eventually you would get to wolves. But other than that, you don't really need the wolves. Like, they could have survived the wolves, and we wouldn't have noticed.
Specific films that you might want to check out if you're looking for a specific breed, one might say,
Mhm.
of the consumptive reckoning coming by way of nature. I did want to mention a book that I read quite a bit of and got a lot of this from. That is Animal Horror Cinema, Genre, History, and Criticism. Now I'm going to get all of these names horribly wrong. Katarina Gregor's daughter Umea, Johan Hoagland Linnaeus, and Niklas Hallen Linnaeus. These were
Okay.
mostly Swedish authors and editors.
I figured.
Put this book
The
together.
Swedish chef would like to thank him.
But if you were looking for a further reading on the Australian horror,
You would feel like that Australian horror would be more generally animal based, considering the horrors that exist in Australia.
yeah. I mean, they have a whole chapter based on modernist animal horror from Australia, kind of its underlying thought forms and the way it's done. Andrew Traucki is your go-to guy in current Australian horror or Aussie horror. He's done stuff on ABCs of Death. He did Blackwater, The Reef, The Reef Stalked, The Jungle, Blackwater Abyss. I have seen all of these. I think just going off on a side tangent about this, he does a good job of making these animals feel realistic and lived in. Doesn't anthropomorphize these too much. And a lot of times you find these humans stuck in their territory and stalked by them, especially in Blackwater and The Reef. As he kind of gets further into things, I mean, The Jungle is more of a supernatural one version of this. It's much more of a Jaws the Revenge in this part of the genre. But he does a good job of taking these creatures and providing no depth, giving them just like you're in a situation, you're in their area, and that's where the horror comes from.
Yeah, because they are what they are.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's the horror
And
part.
he doesn't tend to try to give them further pathos. They are creatures trying to survive, and as we encroach and are then lost in their environment, they will be what they are, and that's where the horror comes from.
Especially in places like Australia and America and colonial Africa, the aggressive, violent approach of the white man into not just like I'm here, I just found myself in this place. It's the I'm going to go out and find whatever I can and shoot it mentality that I think leads to that sort of horror being more impactful. The idea that like this is almost payback, or at least comeuppance.
Yeah.
If not revenge, then comeuppance for the way that we acted when we colonized all these places.
Yeah, ecosystem fighting back.
First of all, I'd like to recommend the works of Yahoo Serious.
Truly
Examination
Aussie
of
horror.
Australia. Aussie horror for sure. He's the proto Carrot Top Aussie horror legend. And then I'm very surprised you didn't include The Happening.
The Happening is distinctly, and
Well, sure.
it's
Yes, it is.
nature
This is-
run amok, but I didn't do. Oh, okay. Let's go back to 6th grade science. I just did flora, not fauna, or did I do fauna, not flora?
Fauna is animals, flora
Yeah.
is plants.
I just did fauna, not flora.
Okay, but the flora uses fauna to attack. That's like one of the opening scenes when they show that tiger ripping the arms off of that dude.
But isn't that because the dude?
Okay, that's well, but the flora uses fauna to attack. That's like one of the opening scenes when they show that tiger ripping the arms off of that dude.
But isn't that because the dude has been coaxed into going into that preserve area?
Yeah,
He's
but
in
I
a
mean,
zoo,
it's
and
the way that
it's the same way. It's
it-
like
it-
it also
yeah.
like has them like utilize cement paving thing to smash somebody.
it's a bad movie. It's a terrible M. Night Shyamalan garbage movie.
It's a fun
which
movie
is
to
funny
watch with friends and kind of high or drunk.
Sure, I get angry. Like Signs, I get angry watching Sign. Which is funny because next time we will tackle my half of the obscure subgenre horror thingy, which will touch on, once again, M. Night Shyamalan.
But what will it be?
Elevators. It's elevators.
Yeah, you can. I was.
The opening skit we did wouldn't make any sense otherwise. So they should know that it's elevators. And we combined animals and elevators.
As everyone so often has.
Which is a really great Radiohead album.
Some weird fishes, man.
But, yeah, we're talking about, this whole thing is about very specific, pointed subgenres of horror movies. And we could, both of us could, about even in this subgenre, another subgenre of these topics as TV shows. So these are some of the more obscure, pointed subgenres, and we thought we'd bring you some really. This is part one. There is definitely going to be a part two. Maybe we'll find more that we find entertaining. We feel inspired to share with you that are equally as rich and in depth as the two we're doing now, but we try to provide to you something obscure and new and something you haven't seen before necessarily, or didn't know it was a subgenre because you don't really think about it.
Yeah, or if you did know about him, maybe some further depth and or historical contexts or
That's
social underpinnings.
That's kind of our thing. That's our shtick.
Yeah, so deal with it.
You buttered your bread, now sleep in it. So next time we're going to talk about another subgenre of horror, the elevator. So we'll tackle some of that and then see where we go from there. Maybe one thing leads to another, and I cut a hold of a bottle of popcorn. You can reach in and see what movies we come out with. Nobody really does that. Why would anyone actually do that? Why is that a thing?
It's just like Alligator the film. It's an urban legend that doesn't
Yeah, right.
happen.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you'd have to be hard the whole time, and also the hot buttered salted popcorn. I'd buy Dick in a Box before I would buy that.
I mean, I'm sure there's some crossover where it's doing something for somebody, but
Well, I mean, it's just logistically would be almost impossible to do, especially before Viagra. I just don't understand how that would work.
well, maybe you have to be like 18 and super horny. You could probably keep it up for most of. I mean, not the whole film, but maybe enough to plug the hole for a bit.
And with that, we'd like to say, please,
Did
that
it.
dick hard inside. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Keep that dick hard inside that buttered popcorn, ladies and gentlemen, for our next episode. we're gonna do more of this nonsense. Yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, scream it from the rooftops, consult your local town crier, and then John Cryer, and then your air fryer. And then don't forget to support your local comic shops and retailers. And on behalf, as one mighty half of Dispatch Ajax, we'd like to say...
First speed, God Wizards.
Now I want to see a god wizard. I want to see what a god wizard does.
I was so like trying to like cut you off and jump ahead of you.
I know. Yes, fair speed god wizards.
Please, go away.